He sold my wedding ring to pay for her surprise party. He claimed it was at the cleaners, but I saw it on her finger in a photo with a cake that read Future Mrs. He told her I lost it in the divorce, even though we were still married. He bought her a designer bag and a yacht cruise. When I confronted him, he said, "It was just a ring." My lawyer said I had a case, but before filing, I sent her the receipts. I knew something was off the minute I opened our shared closet and saw the little velvet box missing. My wedding ring wasn't there, not on the dresser, not in the drawer where I sometimes left it after doing dishes. Gone. When I asked Jason about it, he didn't even look up from his phone. "Relax," he said. "It's at the cleaners, the jewelry shop. I wanted to surprise you, get it polished." Except Jason doesn't do surprises. He forgets birthdays, anniversaries, and once bought me gas station flowers because they were on the way. So, yeah, the cleaner's excuse didn't sit right. But I let it go. I wanted to believe him. 3 days later, my friend Megan sent me a photo from Instagram. "Isn't this Jason's coworker?" she asked. The picture stopped my heart cold. There she was, Ashley from his office, sitting on a rented yacht, holding a cake that said Future Mrs., and on her left hand, glinting in the sunlight, was my wedding ring. The same ring Jason said was being cleaned. My fingers went numb. My brain went quiet in that way it does before the storm hits. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. And then, like some cruel detail from a nightmare, I read the caption. "He said she lost it in the divorce, but now it's mine forever ring." We weren't even divorced. We were separated, sure, trying to figure things out. He'd been living in the guest room for a couple months, claiming he needed space to grow. But I never imagined he'd pawn off my ring to fund his growth. When I confronted him that night, he barely blinked. "It was just a ring," he said flatly. "You'll get over it. There's no room for jealousy and growth." I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked out. My lawyer told me I had a case, that selling shared marital property without consent could screw him legally. But before we filed anything, before I even signed the papers, I decided to do something else. Something he'd never see coming. Jason wasn't always like this. When we met, he was the kind of guy who'd pull over to rescue stray cats or pay for the person behind him in the Starbucks line. I was a nursing student. He was a financial analyst just starting out. He had this steady confidence that made me feel safe, like he had life figured out. We got married in Savannah, under this big oak tree wrapped in fairy lights. My parents loved him. My mom even said, "He's a man who'll never let you down." I used to believe that. I used to think the little things he did, the way he'd text me reminders to eat or leave post-it notes on my coffee mug, meant we had something rare. But then he got promoted, and everything shifted. He started hanging around a new crowd, flashy, loud, hustle types, people who bragged about their cars, their watches, their networking dinners. Suddenly, Jason cared about appearances more than people. He'd scroll through social media, comparing himself to other men, saying things like, "We're not doing enough," or "I should be with someone who understands my drive." The first time I caught him texting another woman, he said it was just networking. She was helping him with a business idea. I forgave him because I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I told myself marriage was about grace, about patience. But the distance between us grew. He stopped coming home for dinner. He started sleeping on the couch to think. Eventually, I found out about Ashley, the coworker who just got out of a bad breakup. I remember him defending her like she was some fragile thing that only he could fix. We went to counseling for a few weeks. He said he wanted to rebuild trust. He even gave me a promise, said he'd make it right, that we'd grow together. That's when I noticed he was wearing my father's old watch, the one he'd said needed repair months earlier. I brushed it off. I wanted to believe that maybe this time he meant it. But the truth was, Jason had been building something new for months, and it wasn't trust. It was an image. He was curating a new life piece by piece. The job, the luxury, the woman. He didn't want a marriage. He wanted a rebrand. And I didn't realize how deep it went until I started digging. Because while my lawyer was building a legal case, I started building something else. A way to ruin the very image he'd sold his soul for. After the yacht photo, everything in me flipped from heartbreak to precision. I stopped crying. I started paying attention. Jason was obsessed with status, how things looked, how people saw him. So I started there. I went through old emails, shared accounts, even his iCloud backups that he never bothered to log out of on our old laptop. I found invoices for yacht rentals, designer gifts, and hotel stays charged to our joint card. He'd been funding his new life with my money. Our money. He'd even transferred $3,500 out of our savings, money we'd set aside for fertility treatments. Just days before that, future Mrs. Party. The bank statements made me physically sick. When I confronted him again, he didn't deny any of it. He actually smirked. "You should have been keeping up," he said. "You were too busy being sad." I swear, I saw something ugly flash in his eyes when he said that. Like he enjoyed watching me break, so I smiled. I told him I just needed time to think. He believed me because arrogance makes people stupid. Meanwhile, I started collecting everything. Every receipt, text, and picture. Screenshots of him telling Ashley he couldn't wait for her to wear the ring in public. Emails where he referred to me as his soon-to-be ex, even though we hadn't filed. He was setting up his story, trying to make me look unhinged, bitter, and irrelevant. But the best part? I discovered he'd been bragging about landing a big promotion at work, something that required a spotless reputation. And his company, a financial advisory firm, had strict ethics clauses. Selling off marital assets, lying about finances, and spending joint money on someone else. That was career-ending material. So instead of crying or begging, I played it cool. I let him think he'd won. He moved more stuff out. He started posting photos of Ashley on his feed, captioning them with cringy motivational quotes like "choose growth over comfort." People ate it up. But while he was busy building his perfect little fairy tale, I was talking to someone else. Someone who knew exactly how to dismantle it all from the inside. Because Jason had no idea that one of the people he was bragging to was also talking to me. Her name was Kara. She worked in the same department as Jason. I didn't know her personally, but when she messaged me on Instagram, just a simple, "Hey, I think we should talk," my stomach dropped. Kara told me she'd overheard Jason talking about me at work. Not just about the separation. About how I was emotionally unstable, draining, and the kind of woman who ruins a man's ambition. He'd been setting up a narrative for months, painting himself as the victim, so when he left, everyone would already be on his side. And the kicker? He told his boss that I was the reason for the missing company funds. See, apparently, Jason had dipped into an account at work, a client fund, to temporarily cover some expenses for his engagement surprise. He told everyone it was a short-term transfer while waiting for a personal bonus to clear. But when the firm's internal audit flagged the transaction, Jason panicked. So, to cover himself, he claimed I had access to his computer and might have accidentally moved money while confused about our finances. He blamed me. That's when everything clicked. The missing ring, the fake divorce story, the smug confidence. He wasn't just being cruel, he was strategically cruel. Kara said she couldn't stand watching it anymore. She sent me screenshots, his office messages, Slack threads, internal emails where he expressed concern about my mental state. I read them with shaking hands. He'd written, "She's been unpredictable lately. I'm just trying to make a clean break before things get worse." Unpredictable. The only unpredictable thing was how long it would take before I destroyed him. I thanked Kara and asked her to keep everything quiet for now. Meanwhile, I started organizing my own receipts. I printed every statement, every photo, every lie. I even had screenshots of Ashley wearing the ring that didn't exist because I lost it. I put it all in a neat, labeled folder and handed it to my lawyer. She looked through it for 10 minutes, then leaned back and said, "If what Kara told you is true, he's not just facing a divorce. He's facing termination and possibly fraud charges." For the first time in months, I felt something close to power. But then Kara messaged me again 2 nights later, saying she'd overheard something else. Something that made me pause mid-sentence when I read it. Jason hadn't just been lying about me, he'd been lying to Ashley, too. After Kara's message, I called her that night. She sounded nervous but steady. She told me Jason had been telling Ashley that the divorce was finalized months ago, that I'd refused to give back the ring because I was bitter. That's why, according to him, he had to buy it back. Except he didn't buy it. He sold it. Kara said Ashley didn't know about the joint accounts or the missing client funds. She thought Jason was some self-made guy trying to rebuild his life after a toxic marriage. He'd even told her I was the reason he had to temporarily move out of state for work. So if I ever showed up, she'd think I was stalking him. It was diabolical, calculated, and I was done playing defense. So I started planning my revenge the same way he planned his lies, carefully. First, I gathered everything in one place. Bank statements, screenshots, the ring photo, the client fund emails, Kara's messages. Then I made digital copies, time-stamped, and uploaded them to a cloud drive only my lawyer and I could access. Next, I quietly reached out to someone in his company's HR department, someone Kara trusted. I didn't say much, just that I had documentation of an employee's financial misconduct and false claims involving company funds. I attached 2 sample screenshots and signed it anonymously. Within days, internal whispers started spreading. Kara said compliance had started reviewing Jason's transactions. He had no idea it traced back to me. But I wasn't done. I still wanted Ashley to see the truth with her own eyes. So I created a new email account under a fake name and sent her a short message. You should know where your engagement ring came from. Check the attached screenshot. That ring wasn't bought for you, it was stolen from his wife. I attached the photo from our wedding day, me wearing that same ring, alongside the yacht photo she'd posted with her cake. I didn't expect a reply. But she wrote back the next morning, "Who are you? I'm the woman he said he divorced." Then silence. 2 days later, Jason called me out of nowhere. His voice was tight. "What did you do?" he demanded. He said Ashley had moved out, said she'd blocked him, said someone had emailed his boss. I just said, maybe this is what growth feels like. But that wasn't the end. Because while he was busy trying to salvage his reputation and chase down Ashley, I got a call from my lawyer with news that made my stomach twist. Something big had just happened at his firm. Something I hadn't planned for, but it was about to make everything even better. When my lawyer called, I thought it was about the divorce papers. Instead, she said, "You might want to sit down." Jason's firm had frozen his accounts and suspended him pending investigation. But that wasn't the twist. The real shock came next. Kara had found out that the client funds Jason claimed to have temporarily borrowed didn't exist. They were fake accounts, shell entries he'd made to hide personal withdrawals. He'd been laundering his own debt through falsified ledgers to make his numbers look clean. He wasn't covering up one mistake. He'd been building a web of them for over a year. And my ring. That was just the last desperate grab before the walls closed in. But here's the part that nearly made me laugh. The promotion he'd bragged about, the one that made him feel untouchable. It wasn't even real. He'd lied to everyone, his friends, his family, Ashley, claiming he'd been offered a senior partner position. He'd even used that fake promotion to take out a loan in anticipation of his new salary. He was living on credit and ego. And now it was all crashing down. My lawyer said the firm had turned the evidence over to the state's financial crimes unit. Kara confirmed that 2 investigators had shown up that morning, taking Jason's work computer and files. Still, I hadn't heard from him in days, until he showed up at my apartment. He looked wrecked, unshaven, red-eyed, wearing the same shirt from 3 days ago. He tried to push his way in, saying he just needed 5 minutes to explain. I didn't move. He said Ashley had left town, that his company overreacted, that I didn't understand what was at stake. And then he said something that froze me. "Everything I did was for us," he said. "You were supposed to stand by me. You were supposed to protect me." I laughed in his face. "You sold my wedding ring to fund your affair. What part of that was for us?" He didn't flinch. He just whispered, "You don't know the full story." That was the moment I realized there was something darker underneath it all, something I hadn't even begun to uncover. Because later that night, Kara called again. Her voice was trembling. She said the auditors had discovered why Jason needed the money so badly. And once I heard it, I understood the horrifying reason behind everything he'd done. When Kara told me, I went completely silent. I didn't even know how to respond. Jason wasn't in debt because of bad spending or overspending on Ashley. He was in debt because he'd been paying someone regularly, secretly, and in cash. A woman, but not Ashley. Her name was Erin, and she'd been Jason's client years ago, before his promotion. She worked for a small nonprofit his firm consulted with. Turns out they'd had an affair long before he met Ashley, back when we were still newly married. It ended when she got pregnant. I could barely breathe when Kara said it. Jason had been sending money to support the child, a little girl, now almost 4 years old. The payments weren't official. No court involvement. Just envelopes of cash, wired transfers under fake names, hidden under consulting reimbursements. And that's why he was always short on money. That's why he'd started fabricating client accounts to cover up the missing funds. That's why he sold my ring. He'd been buying himself time, paying off the mother of his secret child, trying to keep both lives from colliding. The arrogance, the manipulation, the way he'd looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll get over it." He'd sold my wedding ring, the symbol of our marriage, to pay off the consequence of a betrayal he'd been hiding since the beginning. And worse, he didn't do it out of guilt. He did it because he thought he could control the fallout. When I confronted him the next day, I didn't mention Aaron or the child. I wanted to see if he'd lie again. He did. He said the money went to help someone who needed it. I asked who. He said, "A family friend." That was the final nail. He wasn't a man who made a mistake. He was a man who built an entire identity out of deceit, and he'd been willing to burn anyone, me, his company, his mistress, to keep it intact. That night, I finished what I started. I sent the full documentation, including proof of the hidden transfers, to both the financial crimes investigator and the firm's board. I didn't even need to add commentary. The evidence spoke for itself. When I hit send, I felt something strange, something I hadn't felt in months. Calm, but I wasn't finished. Not yet, because I wanted him to feel it, to lose what he valued most. Not money. Not reputation. When the investigators finally caught up to Jason, I wasn't surprised. It happened fast. His firm terminated him immediately. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. Fraud, falsified accounts, and unreported personal payments. He wasn't arrested right away, but the state froze his assets pending charges. I didn't have to ruin him publicly. He did that himself. My revenge was quieter and meaner. See, while everyone was whispering about the investigation, I made sure the whispers got louder in the right places. His parents, his golf buddies, his LinkedIn circle, each got a little nudge. Screenshots, receipts, enough to make sure no one could twist the story in his favor. Ashley reached out once. She said she didn't know about Aaron, the child, or the fake promotion. She said she was sorry for me, not for him. She'd found out he'd proposed to her with my ring while he was still making payments to Aaron. She said she'd pawned it the moment she learned the truth. I told her to keep the money. "Consider it hazard pay," I said. When Jason finally called me from his brother's number, he didn't yell. He begged. He said, "You've destroyed everything. I don't even recognize myself anymore." I told him, "That's because you built yourself out of lies." Then I hung up. The divorce finalized quickly after that. The court sided with me on almost everything: our joint assets, the house, even the car he used to impress Ashley. He walked away with debt, legal fees, and a ruined reputation. The irony: the ring he sold to keep his secrets bought me my freedom. I took the settlement money and moved to Asheville. I got a new job, a new start, and a new version of peace that didn't depend on someone else's promises. Sometimes I think about that photo, the one of Ashley on the yacht, holding the cake that said future Mrs. Nothing. Jason always said there was no room for jealousy in growth. Turns out he was right. Because once I outgrew him, there was no room left for pity either. He wanted control. I gave him exposure. He wanted freedom. I gave him consequence. And in the end, when I finally stopped being the woman who trusted him, I became the woman he could never manipulate again.